Well, thank you for this opportunity to speak. This is my first time at ISPS, and so it's a real honor to be here with you all. So my name is Catherine Eubanks. I'll be speaking on Alliance Rupture and Repair. And what I'll be presenting comes out of a research program with my colleagues, in particular Chris Moran, and also formerly with the late Jeremy Safran, where we've worked on defining and measuring alliance ruptures, developing and testing models of rupture repair, and then developing a form of training, alliance-focused training for therapists to help therapists identify and navigate ruptures. Now, something important I should own at the beginning, and this is not a surprise given what David was saying, is that an exclusion criterion for all our studies was psychotic disorders. So the research I'm presenting is not, from my group, is not including patients with psychotic disorders. So is the alliance important in therapy with individuals with psychosis? Yes. There's lots of data and theory to support that, as we now know very well. People with experience with psychosis are likely to have had experiences with trauma, may have had relationship difficulties, may have had difficult relationships with mental health care providers, and would really benefit from a strong therapeutic alliance. There's also research showing an association between a good alliance in therapy with individuals with psychosis and good outcomes, including reduced psychotic symptoms, reduced rehospitalizations, and increased patient self-esteem. So alliance is definitely important. Is the particular approach to the alliance and this focus on rupture and repair that I'm presenting, is that important? I leave that to you, as having greater expertise than I, to be the judge of that. So I'll be curious what you think after I'm done. So let's start with a little exercise. I'm going to show you a brief video. This is a patient. You're going to hear the therapist ask her a question, and then she's going to respond. And my question to you is, how does her response make you feel? Like if you were her therapist, how would you feel if she responded this way?
Does that make sense to you?
Maybe.
Okay. So how did it make you feel? Here are some feeling words that might fit how you felt. I'm just curious, was anybody annoyed? No. Curious, so a lot of people are curious, good. Confused? Neutral? A little bit angry, maybe? Okay, a little anxious? Okay. So different feelings, we're all gonna have different reactions because we're all different people. So let's do it again. This time her response will be a little different, and let's see how we feel.
Does that make sense to you?
Does that make sense to you?
Angry? Annoyed? Maybe some more people are annoyed this time? Challenged? Cautious? Okay, so we have different reactions. This is important, and the importance of paying attention to our reactions, I'll come back to in a moment. So why the alliance? There's a lot of research showing that while therapy can be very helpful, there's still room for improvement. Not everybody improves. Some people actually get worse. Some people drop out prematurely. And one way to improve therapy could be improving the alliance, because a good alliance is associated with good outcome. A poor alliance is associated with poor outcome. We know therapists they differ in their ability to build and maintain good alliances. So there may be space for helping the therapists who are having more difficulty do better. And we know that alliance ruptures are very common, and unrepaired ruptures are associated with poor outcome and premature dropout, while repaired ruptures are associated with good outcome and better retention in therapy. Now I'm talking about the alliance, maybe we should make sure we're defining it the same way. Originally developed in the psychoanalytic literature, has become to be seen as a common integrative variable important across all therapy approaches. Ed Borden's definition of the alliance has a big influence on the alliance literature. He talked about these three pieces: agreeing on the goals, assigning tasks, and having a bond. So you can think of this as the importance of a purposeful collaboration between the patient and therapist, and an emotional bond of trust and respect. Can also think about the alliance as sort of a negotiation between two people. I'm focusing on therapy between one person and a therapist. Obviously, this idea could then be expanded to group and family therapy and other forms of therapy. But both patient and therapist, as people, have needs for agency, autonomy, defining myself, and needs for communion, connection, relatedness. And the patient's two needs for this and the therapist's two needs can sometimes clash or come into conflict. That's just inevitable. We tend as humans to see ourselves as subjects and see others as objects. That tendency can come into play in the therapeutic relationship. And we can think of a rupture as any difficulties in this area. Difficulties with collaboration, a strain in the bond, getting stuck in one position, objectifying the other. And we can see repair as seeing the other as a subject, as really recognizing the humanity of the other person. And this kind of experience can be a corrective experience. So that's sort of at the theoretical level, but more concretely, how do we identify when a rupture is happening in therapy? And we would like to argue that you can look at interpersonal markers, seeing the behaviors I'm engaging in and the patient's engaging in, as well as intrapersonal markers, the therapist's own experience. So I'm going to start with the interpersonal markers. And we found it helpful to talk about these in terms of two subtypes of ruptures. Confrontation ruptures, we're moving against the other or against the work of therapy, and withdrawal ruptures, moving away from the other or away from the work of therapy. And to illustrate this, I'm using examples from a coding system we developed, the Rupture Resolution Rating System. We use this to watch therapy tapes and identify when ruptures are happening. And it does have predictive validity. If a lot of ruptures are happening as we've coded with the system, that is associated with poor outcome. So I'll start with confrontation. This can include things like complaining, criticizing the other, criticizing the treatment.
I see. You're not going to be able to help me.
So it may be very direct. Maybe complaining about something the therapist has asked the patient to do.
Do I still have to fill out the questionnaire? It takes so much time, and I don't think it's really gonna help.
Or it may be sort of pushing back against the other or the work of therapy, sort of rejecting the other's ideas, getting defensive, defending oneself, denying something in a hostile way.
Yeah, everybody does that sometimes. That's normal.
Or trying to control or pressure the other person, maybe being overly directive or pushing ideas on them or not giving them space.
How does this therapy work? I'm tired of waiting.
So I've shown some examples where the patient is the one exhibiting the markers of confrontation, but therapists can do it too, right? So in this instance, you're going to see the patient, you're going to hear the therapist, and imagine how you would feel if you were in the patient's shoes. She's trying to express some discomfort she has with her therapist.
So I wanted to talk to you. Lately, I've been feeling uncomfortable. I just really feel like you're not hearing me.
Feels like that's the same complaint
you have about your partner.
So that kind of response probably isn't going to really open up space to talk about the difficulties they're having in their relationship. So confrontations are usually more obvious. Withdrawals can be more subtle and more difficult to recognize. And I also think no matter what is causing the withdrawal, it's happening in the relationship, it's impacting the relationship, and it's important to attend to it in the relationship. Oftentimes when I'll present this markers to therapists who maybe work mostly with anxiety or depression, they'll say, oh, but that's just the patient's personality. And it might be related to their personality, but it also could mean something important is happening in the relationship, and it shouldn't be dismissed as just their personality. And I wonder if, in working with psychosis, if someone might say, oh, that's just negative symptoms, and not kind of, it would be important to be curious about what's happening in terms of the relationship. So what this could look like shutting down, maybe giving no response or a very short, brief, minimal response to a question, maybe sort of giving up or denying something in an avoidant, I don't want to talk about it kind of way.
It's fine. It's nothing.
So that patient was shutting down. Or you could avoid by speaking in a very abstract, intellectualized way, or telling an avoidant story that's not trying to kind of further the work, but sort of move away from the work, or trying to shift the topic away from something.
Things aren't going so great right now in my marriage. I have this habit with romantic relationships. Once things start going well, I sabotage them. It's like this pattern. Like when I was young, and my feelings of perfectionism and my need to get everything right, and this belief deep down that I don't deserve to be happy. You know, I think it's related to birth order. I was reading some stuff online a couple weeks back, and they said,
Okay, so you could have a patient who's talking a lot and saying a lot of things that might sound interesting, but they're really moving away from their experience, and they're really moving away from kind of being genuine and vulnerable. And then finally, masking. So where maybe someone's kind of hiding how they really feel about something. Maybe they're really not happy with how therapy's going, but they smile and act deferential or try to defer to the therapist. Or there's sort of a split between what they're saying and the facial expression or the nonverbals they're using to communicate it.
The work was great. You're always so helpful.
Right, so we don't feel totally convinced that's how she really feels, right?
It's not easy to talk about this.
So trying to kind of distance from how whatever this is that's not easy to talk about is painful, or the patient feels vulnerable, but the smile may distract us a little bit from how painful it really feels. And of course, we as therapists can withdraw as well. So in this example, the patient is describing a difficult and abusive relationship with her brother.
So I just feel like every time I get upset, like he gets more upset. And with all the yelling and the, stuff, I really just don't know what to do.
Tell me more about your relationship with your sister.
Right. So maybe not tracking with what the patient is talking about, maybe therapist sort of getting uncomfortable and so shifting away. So to summarize, we can have these ways of identifying ways we or our patients are moving against, like complaining, criticizing, pushing back, controlling, pressuring, and then ways we may be moving away, shutting down, avoiding, masking. Now, I'm talking about these in two neat categories, but in real life, everything is always more complicated and messy. So of course, ruptures can be a mixture of both. And sometimes when it's confusing what's going on, we may be able to sort of tease apart both are happening. And that's why we feel a push and a pull at the same time. So those are the interpersonal markers. We also, as clinicians, have access to our own intrapersonal markers, our own internal emotional experience. So like what we did at the beginning, that experience tells us something about what may be happening in the relationship. Any emotion we have could be a clue something's going on. It doesn't automatically mean there's a rupture, but I think it's an opportunity to be curious. Why am I feeling this right now? Maybe if I'm feeling angry or upset, maybe there's a confrontation happening. Maybe if I'm feeling bored, it's a withdrawal. Withdrawals are often kind of boring. Maybe if I'm feeling confused, there's a mixed rupture. In addition, our emotions tell us something about our action tendencies, something we may feel pulled to do. And so we may be able to recognize that before we do it. So am I feeling anxious and it's making me want to withdraw and pull away? Can I track that before I withdraw? Or maybe when I feel anxious, it makes me want to lean in and seize control. So maybe I'm being overly controlling. Can I recognize that and deal with it before my patient sort of bears the brunt of it? So these are all ways to identify a rupture's happening, and sometimes that's the most important thing, just to realize that it's happening. But if we want to go further into how to repair it, my colleagues and I have proposed several different pathways to repair. So there's not one right way. We have a number of options to draw on. And in this figure, you can see there's a movement from acknowledging the rupture, which could happen out loud. The therapist could say, I think something's going on, or it could just be internally. The therapist realizes something may be going on. And these different pathways are efforts to move towards that new relational experience, where patient and therapist really recognize each other, are able to really communicate with each other and be on the same page again. So the first of these three pathways, reattuning to feelings or intentions, I think of as just continuing to do good therapy, continuing to be empathic and attuned, to validate the other person, to clarify if there's something was misunderstood, sort of recognize how each person is feeling, and to just, we're constantly, as human beings in interaction, we're constantly slightly misattuning and then reattuning, misattuning and reattuning. So just continuing to do that in an empathic way could be the first pathway. The second pathway, renegotiating tasks or goals, is particularly helpful if there's a disagreement about a task or goal of therapy. And this could just be an opportunity to kind of revisit what the task is and try to come back to the same page. We did a task analysis of this, and the point of this diagram is that there were lots of things we saw therapists doing to move from difficulties in collaborating on a task to being able to collaborate again. Different things which might include just re-explaining the task, maybe it wasn't clear, explaining the rationale for the task, to being open to changing the task to better meet the patient's needs. A lot of different options. So to illustrate this, I'm going to show a clip from a video where, and this is with an actor playing a patient, I, as the therapist, have asked the patient to keep a journal as homework, and the patient kept the journal all week but really didn't like it and has told me very clearly that she did not like keeping the journal. So now I'm going to try to renegotiate that task. So I'm wondering And I appreciate that, you know, it really speaks to your effort that even though this didn't feel like a good fit for you, that you still stuck with it for a week. So I appreciate that. And I'm wondering if we could try, maybe try doing something, like give it sort of one more try, but maybe try modifying it or try, I don't know, what are your thoughts about that?
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
What kind of modifications would help?
Well, that's, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of, if I had a better sense of what's the piece of it that's the hardest for you?
I guess figuring out what feelings to write down that would mean something to you.
Oh, that would mean something to me. Can you say more about that?
Well, I mean, I feel sort of the same negative feelings every day. Sort of this general anxiousness and just a reluctance to go out and socialize and just a concern about how other people perceive me. And so it's just sort of a constant. It's not like it's changing day to day.
Yeah.
So I can list that every single day in my journal, but I don't know how that helps. And I don't know what kind of words you're looking for to say, oh, that's how I can help her, or
Okay.
I don't.
So trying to find a way to communicate better to me what's going on.
Well, the journal's for you, right?
Well, that's a good question. I can appreciate it might feel that way because I asked you to do it, and it does sort of give me data in a sense, but it's also, my hope is that it could also be helpful for you, that the act of doing it can kind of help you be more aware of what's going on for you in a way that itself can help you with regulating your anxiety. But it sounds like doing it this past week, it didn't achieve that goal.
Not so far.
Okay. So I'm wondering, so every day you were writing down your feelings every day, and it was like the same feelings every day. So I'm wondering if we maybe adjusted it, like, were there different things contributing to your feelings each day? Sort of different antecedents to those feelings each day?
Yeah, I mean, every day is a little different. I do slightly different things, so I'm sure there are slightly different things that contribute.
Yeah.
Every
So I'm
time.
wondering, like, what if we build some of that in, sort of some of the events that contributed to how you were feeling?
Yeah, you think that would make a difference?
Well, I think part of what we're trying to do is not just help you be aware of what you're feeling, but sort of the things that contribute to it, and then the effect that it has on you. And so maybe...
I see, and then I should just not do those things that...
Well, let's start by just trying to get a sense of what those things are, and kind of be curious about that together, and look for patterns.
Okay. Yeah, I could try that.
And I guess I also want to add, like, the idea is not that it'll immediately change. It's more like we're trying to understand it some more.
So it's fine if I say the same thing every single day in the journal?
Then we learn something from that.
Do we?
We can. I know you're still having some reservations about it.
Yeah, I sort of figured if it's the same every day, then you're not getting much information out of that. And I already know how I feel every day. So.
Right. But let's see, because you mentioned the events can be a little different.
Yeah.
So
like
what
I
if...
might go out one night or something and then
Yeah.
out the next night or something.
Yeah. So let's track that. What are the events and the feelings? And let's see if there are any patterns there with different events and how they impact the feelings for this week. Does that...
Yeah, I could try that.
How was this for you, this conversation we just had about this?
I think it's helpful because I think you understand why I didn't really get much out of the journal this past week. So yeah, maybe I can kind of explain to you what I did each day in the journal, and maybe we'll get more out of that.
Yeah, and my hope is maybe both of us will get more out of that. Yeah, but let's try it and let's see how it goes this week.
Okay.
Okay, I appreciate you doing that because I know it's not easy. Okay, so she's probably still not going to do the journal, but that's the most important thing is not so much doing the journal, but like the relational experience she's having with me. So the hope is that, I mean, I tried different things. I tried discussing changing the task, explaining the rationale. She did start to engage with me on discussing changing the task. So we were starting to collaborate some there. And also making some space for her to voice her concerns and hopefully feel that she was being taken seriously. And a little bit of that was starting to get into the realm of exploring the rupture, which is the third pathway, where you really focus on the rupture and really try to go deep into understanding it, with the idea being that there's some kind of underlying need underneath the rupture. And by exploring the rupture, it can help us understand, for example, in terms of needs of agency and communion, like what's going on for the patient and possibly also the therapist. And this process of exploring is not necessarily a straightforward linear one. That's why the path here is all these twists and turns. It can be sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It may look kind of messy and confusing as you try to sort of go forward with the faith that exploring this will get us somewhere in terms of better understanding each other. And there may be temptations along the way to avoid the exploration because it's kind of uncomfortable to explore this thing between us. And it's important for the therapist to track that avoidance and also explore that avoidance. And we found it helpful when exploring a rupture to think in terms of metacommunication, so communicating about the communication process, and to really do this in a collaborative way, very much focused on the details of the here and now, on a shared contribution. We're both part of this rupture. It's not a chance to blame the patient for the rupture. Really trying to become more aware, to be more mindful in our interaction. And this promotes emotion regulation and mutual recognition. Concretely, this could be asking the patient how they feel or observing, conjecturing how you think they feel, observing what's going on between us. Are we in some kind of dance? Are we in a power struggle? Or even disclosing what's going on for me as the therapist. So I have another example of a therapist, this is my colleague Chris Moran, using this exploratory approach with a patient.
So I wanted to start this session by getting a sense of how the last session, which was our first session together, how that was for you, and what was your experience of it, and what thoughts you had after it?
Yeah, it was okay. I think it was probably good that I came.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't know if I liked every question you asked me, and I don't really like to talk about myself that much. But I think it was okay, and you know, hopefully, you know, it gets better.
Okay. Well, so can we focus on the parts that you weren't so okay with? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Well, you asked me, you know, questions about myself and what I thought you know, what my concerns were, and a lot of that is, you know, what other people might think of me and things that I do, and I think that part made me a little uncomfortable, just thinking about that, and sharing that I feel that way with you. Like, I just didn't, I mean, maybe then you're gonna think, you know, there's something wrong with me for thinking that, like I should just...
Well, say a little bit more about that. I know you allude to other people, but you're also suggesting something about me and our process together and how I might react.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, I think you want to help me. I just don't know if you maybe understand, like, everything from that I'm going through from, like, my world.
Right.
So I think that makes it hard for me.
I get that. It makes sense. And I think, look, therapy's hard, and I'm still a stranger to you. So I think it's understandable to have some misgivings about opening yourself up. But I still want to hear more about the misgivings because I still think it's important if you can understand that.
Okay. I want to, I think I maybe want you to like me, and I want other people to like me. And if I tell you something, I want to know that you're not going to look at me like there's something wrong with me. So I think, like, I just want to know that, I can share something with you, and that you're like, oh, yeah, I get that. I understand that. And I think that that's really where my concern and my fear came from last week. Yeah.
What's going on for you now?
No, it's all right. I mean, it was an okay week. It's an okay week, and yeah, I mean, it's just hard sometimes when you're just trying to be your own person, in just making sure that you fit in all the different places that, like at work, I want to make sure that I fit in and people aren't looking at me strangely. Yeah.
I'm a little torn now because I could see asking you more about that, fitting in the outside world. But I still have this curiosity about your concerns about working with me, fitting in with me. I know you mentioned the world, something about understanding your world, so I'm willing to go down either path, but I just want to share where I'm at with that.
You're a person like I am, but maybe our experiences are a little different. And I just want to know that you have a way of understanding the things that I'm going through, because there might be a little different from the things that you go through. Because we're just, I think our worlds are a little bit different. So maybe some of the things that happen to me might not happen to somebody like you.
Okay. I hear you, but can you say even more about the difference? Like, what do you? I'm imagining things, but I just want to I also don't want to put words in your mouth. So I want to kind of, in a sense, draw you out because I feel like you're being careful also.
Well, I mean, you're a guy, you know that. So there's some things that obviously women go through, and we're supposed to look a certain way and act a certain way, and you don't have to worry about that. But also, I think that your background, is different, and mine is, I'm a minority, and I feel like I'm a minority and a woman, and you're not. And I don't know if I share with you, if you're like, oh, that just happens to those people.
Okay. So as a white male, there's some concern that I just won't understand or get you. Is that fair?
I mean, it's fair, right? I mean, I think it's...
Yeah.
Yeah?
Okay. So you could see in that example how the therapist really wanted to understand the patient's concerns and kept kind of inviting her to share them, and also shared some of what he was experiencing and his own thought process, and get the point when she went quiet and then sort of was changing the topic, and he's like, okay, I'm torn. We could go this way, but I'm also really curious about this. So that kind of disclosure and communicating about their communication process. So just to wrap up, because I know we're running out of time, some takeaways are pay attention to ruptures, especially withdrawals. Try metacommunicating, putting words to your experience. Frame ruptures as a shared dilemma. I think this is really important. It's assume that we are inevitably part of whatever's happening and approach it that way. Don't be afraid to get messy by getting into it and exploring the rupture. And it's really critical that approach to rupture repair comes from a place of humility, being aware that we may have misstepped and we've inevitably contributed to the rupture in some way. Compassion for our patient, but also for ourselves, and forgiving and being compassionate towards our inevitable mistakes. Really courting curiosity. This is a word that keeps coming up, and that's a really critical part of rupture repair, I think, is being curious about what's happening and approaching it with a non-judgmental, open, curious stance. Being patient, because it may take a while to understand what's happening and to repair it, and trying to balance with positivity, sort of knowing that if we stick with this and try to understand it, we will get somewhere eventually. So I hope that some of this is helpful in working with individuals with psychosis, and I thank you for your time.